Really, what we're looking at, and this is what we're going to touch on as we move through this, is can we develop skill, not simply teaching technique? Because there's a distinct difference there. And I think a lot of people use skill and technique as interchangeable words, but developing skill or being skillful is different than being technical. And I want to delve a little bit deeper there. This is something that over the years I've spent a lot of time on researching this to get a better understanding of this. Because I've been in the in youth soccer for 16 years now in New Jersey alone already, and I definitely have evolved myself as a coach and also as a director of coaching. And I've learned a lot over the years based on what's out there now, because there's a lot of good and valuable information out there that we can use to improve our training methods and habits. So this goes, by the way, hand in hand with a part of our development philosophy. Like our objective is part of, like, we have a couple core tenets, and one of developing people in think about this, right? What did you do as a child after school and during your vacation? I would argue, I mean, if anyone is of my generation or maybe slightly older, although the age difference won't be too big, you probably were outside constantly playing all kinds of games, or all kinds of activities. You weren't inside. Even during a vacation, you were outside all the time. You weren't in the house doing computer games, or you weren't on your phone, etc. That in itself is something really important to note, because kids spend less time playing on their own and or with their friends or with their siblings or whatever it is, right? They grow up drastically different than you and I did. And almost everything they go through right now is adult led, right? Whether it's in school, which is very rigid, whether it's outside of school, every extracurricular activity is scheduled. And it's really hard as a parent not to fall for that as well, because your children have friends, their friends are doing X, Y, Z as well. It's hard to have them play outside of these structured settings, right? So you find yourself going from structured adult-led setting to another structured adult-led setting constantly as a child's growing up. That has a distinct impact on who you are in a sport like soccer, for example. Another one, right, that we really need to consider is, what is the impact of other sports, right? The US, and it also has its pluses, because I think we can also gain a lot of valuable knowledge from other sports, but a lot of sports in the US are coach-centered, right? We just highlighted ourselves how soccer is dynamic, fast-paced. You got to make decisions on the fly, right? We had the dialogue before. A lot of other sports in the US, it's where the coach calls the plays, whether it's in football, in basketball, or in baseball, right? Coaches make the decisions versus the players. But yet we want to develop capable decision makers. So if we know this, right, we got to walk away from, or sometimes even let go of what we know from other sports, and look at soccer as the sport that it is, right? And one thing that's really important as well, and whether we like it or not, but a lot of decisions in youth sports are made based on a focus on winning, on outcome, and not on development, unfortunately. How can it be about development if you go to a tournament with an under 10, under 11, under 12 team, where you're more worried about winning than developing the players? The setup that we have here is vastly different from other countries, right? I never heard of something like GOT Soccer rankings, for example. And if you're not familiar with it, at some point I can look in all that as well. But basically, you get ranked based on the outcome of tournaments and league participation, and people hold on to that as being very important, even though it doesn't say one thing about the overall development of the team or the players on that team. Once you have read through this, I can say that not too long ago I read an article in which they looked at which players were actually successful coming out of youth development academies, part of the Premier League in England, and which players didn't, right? Or what separated those that did make it versus those that didn't make it. And you got to understand that a lot of these kids end up in the development programs of a professional club at a young age, spend a lot of time there, but yet there's something that separates them. What separated those that made it from those and the many that didn't make it was the fact that those that do make it often still spend more time playing outside the structured environment versus what they do in the structured environment. Just let that sink in for a little bit. Important to know is understand the difference between increased performance versus learning. Increased performance means you're literally training to be better in training. If you repeat the same thing over and over again in training for a longer period of time, a certain technique, a certain pass, over time, you'll get the idea that you're getting better. The coach will think that, the parents on the sideline will think that, heck, the players may even think that, if that makes sense. All right. However, it is shown that that setup actually, I wouldn't say makes the brain lazy, but the important learning centers of your brain aren't fully triggered. Right? You're not fully, you're not uploading the information efficiently. So the transfer of knowledge from that scenario to a game situation will be limited, simply because you're not challenging the brain, and especially the parts of the brain that are about learning. Okay. However, people take what they see in the practice as in, oh, this is great, we're getting better, but you're not really learning. All you do is look better in practice. If you train out of context, do the same thing over and over again. Learning, however, is challenging. It's it is chaotic at times as well, if that makes sense. And unfortunately, people don't realize that it takes a lot longer for actual learning to show, if that makes sense. All right, so based on the topic of today, a technique is the ability to perform a physical task, while a skill is the ability to deploy it in the competition environment. All right. So in some sports, being able to perform a physical task is great. Gymnastics, for example, some of these athletes, super well trained, you're literally using your body to perform a physical task. All right. And that's what you're supposed to do. But in a dynamic sport like soccer, it's important to be able to develop skill, all right, within the competition environment. Now, for the sake of